Welcome back to another episode of Sacred Wild Man. My name is Roy. And today I'm going to get into a pretty deep and extensive topic that not a lot of people talk about. And I think it's one that is long overdue and deserves much attention. This is going to be the first video and most certainly not the last on this topic. So today what I'm going to be going into is abuse from women and the feminine. And here's the outline I have laid out for today. I'm going to go into why this topic deserves attention, how to define abuse from the shadow feminine, some examples from women, the patriarchy rebuttal, and the shadow feminine in men, because shadow feminine can occur in women and in men. It's not just limited to women. The solution, and then some resources. So let's dive right in. First, I want you to consider some of these questions. To you, the viewer watching right now, have you ever experienced fear that you'd be rejected from the group if you voice a differing opinion than the consensus? Have you ever experienced the need to choose your words carefully for fear of being accused of excluding or offending someone? Have you ever experienced being the topic of passive aggressive gossip or jealousy from a close girlfriend that led to the end of the friendship? Needing to hide yourself or hide your success for fear of making others upset? Or low self-esteem, even though you were never harmed physically or sexually? I am willing to bet that every single one of you watching or listening to this video can relate to one of those bullet points. And that means you have experienced the shadow feminine. You've experienced the grip of the shadow feminine in your life as this invisible hand that guides and dictates your behavior. Now, the reason this topic deserves attention is because right now in our world, what I see is a tremendous split, especially in the West. In the West, there is this modern crusade against men and masculinity. There's this intense split in the collective where men occupy everything that is wrong and bad with the world, and women are innocent beyond blame. And if women do anything wrong, it's because it's a reaction to men having done wrong first. That's what I see in the world. And anytime that there is a split, you can be sure there is a distortion, because splitting doesn't happen from a healthy, integrated psyche. It happens from a fragmented one. And this sort of abuse that is unique to the shadow feminine is much harder to spot. Like overt abuse is much more easily spotted. I want you to imagine if you and I, like we were just walking down the street, right, and we saw a man physically and sexually assaulting a woman. Neither of us would look at each other in confusion and be like, what are they doing? Like, are they engaged in some sort of mating dance ritual? What is going on? No, we would see clearly, like, hey, that guy is assaulting this woman. We need to stop that. It's overt, it's in your face, and you know, hey, not okay. But for covert abuse, where you never lay a hand on somebody, that is far more difficult to spot. And so the shadow feminine is what is enacting this covert abuse in our world. There's the, false perception that if 100% of the men in the world got their shit together, that everything would be fixed. And I'm here to tell you that is completely untrue. If tomorrow 100% of men in the world got their shit together, we'd still have issues because the shadow feminine has not been addressed. So let me go through some examples of the qualities and tactics of abuse from the shadow feminine. Shaming, groupthink, character assassination, gossip, keeping score, keeping grudges, deflection, crocodile tears, weaponized guilt tripping, gaslighting, and holding the relationship hostage. Over the past 5 years since 2020, I've seen these more and more and more out in the collective. And in this presentation, I'm going to take you through examples of each one of these. I want to start by diving into this definition of indirect aggression, which is what the shadow feminine does. And there's this book written by prominent feminist Phyllis Chesler, who interestingly got a lot of pushback from women for writing this book titled Woman's Inhumanity to Woman. So in this book, she defines indirect aggression as a type of hostile behavior that is carried out in order to harm the opponent while avoiding being identified as aggressive. It's cunning, right? That's very smart, right? Rather than punching somebody in the face like men or the shadow masculine can do, right? Which is once again overt, abrupt, in your face, no question about it. Indirect aggression, the shadow feminine, goes about it in a way where she can enact harm, but is also seen as no, she didn't do anything aggressive, right? She didn't lay a single hand on this person. Some examples of this indirect aggression are shutting the other out of the group, becoming friends with another as revenge, ignoring, gossiping, telling bad stories, planning secretly to bother the other, saying bad things behind the back, saying to others, let's not be with him or her, telling the other's secrets to a third person, writing notes in which the other is criticized, criticizing the other's hair or clothing, trying to get others to dislike the person. Okay. In all of those examples, not a single physical or sexual act of harm has been done. It's all indirect aggression and hostile behavior that can be passed off and dismissed as no, there was no ill intent. I was just, this is just conversation. And it's much easier to mask that aggression and hostile behavior through these indirect forms. And this way that the shadow feminine operates, this kind of abuse that women are capable and do, and men can do as well, there's an art to it, right? There's a quite brilliant art, honestly, when I see what some women are capable of and have done to other men and to other women. And that's not talked a lot about. It's like there's this taboo among women in the sisterhood. There's this sisterhood wound of like, you don't talk about this. We can't reveal this. The rule is, in Fight Club, it's like first rule of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. First rule for the sisterhood is don't talk about the things that we do to each other that we know that we do, but we pretend that we don't do because we don't want to know that we could be so horrible because we can't tolerate thinking that we could ever be this horrible. No, men are the horrible ones. So don't talk about it. That's what goes on. And so it leaks out into these ways of subtle, covert manipulation and aggression. And it's quite brilliant, honestly, the art in which the shadow feminine can cut somebody down. There's this psychological breaking a person down without ever laying a hand on them. And so here are just two simple statements that give an example of what this can sound like. So imagine there's a mother walking in the park with her little boy. Her little boy is, let's say, 8 years old. And then the mother, separated from the father. There was a messy divorce. Parents, they didn't get along well. And she's holding a lot of ill will and resentment towards the father or ex-husband. And that's not uncommon. And then she says offhandedly to her son, I can only hope you don't grow up to be like your father. And how does that land in the consciousness, the psyche of that growing boy? Right? Again, not a single hand was laid on him, but that statement will stay in his subconscious in a way that will cause lots of damage that just him getting slapped in the face would not cause that sort of long-term ripple effect of damage. But again, there was not a single hand laid. And so if we were to examine this, right, a crowd of people to look at, did this mother just abuse her son by saying that statement? We'd be like, I don't know, did she? Like, she didn't call her son any names. She didn't really even call her ex-husband a name. She didn't touch her son or hit her son. She just said, I can only hope you don't grow up to be like your father, in a tone that has a lot of disdain and condescension. But did she abuse her son? It it almost seems difficult to put a finger on it. Like, okay, maybe she didn't. That's the genius and art of the shadow feminine. Here's another statement. Let's say there is a girl, two girls, who are actually friends with each other, but both of these girls like the same guy, and they are competing for his attention and affection. And despite being friends, one of the girls says while she's walking, say after school, walking with this guy, and she can say offhandedly, Julie is kind of a slut. I mean, I like her and all, but she slept with like 5 guys just last week. Even though that didn't ever happen. But it can just be said offhandedly like that. And all of a sudden now this guy has it in his mind that, oh, Julie must be a slut. No, I don't want to be with her. So maybe I'd rather be with this girl instead. And instantaneously, there is now a break in the friendship, while at the same time not owning up to this competition, this bitterness, jealousy, and envy that is between these two girls. So, in comparison to the shadow feminine, these forms of indirect aggression, the shadow masculine is, in my opinion, basic, right? Super basic. It's just in your face, abrupt. You see it, you know it. There's no question about it. Like, there's nothing else to be said. It's basic. Shadow feminine, there's so much more art to it. Now, I'm going to take you through some examples in movies, media, real conversations I've had with women in my DMs who had messaged me when I started to talk about the shadow feminine, and real life stories. Now, because I'm going to show you some clips from TV shows and movies, I'm going to put this copyright disclaimer, right, for the fair use, and let's get into it. So the first one is going to be a clip from The Office on false compliments.
Ignore her. Those glasses are so cool.
Really?
Yeah, you look like Lisa Loeb or Tina Fey or someone. You should definitely wear them all the time.
Huh, maybe I will.
Guess who just became the cutest girl in the office?
Now, this clip is phenomenal in illustrating the shadow feminine, and the actress Mindy, who's playing Kelly, did a phenomenal job. Like throughout the whole Office, she does a wonderful job. And she does a wonderful job here of capturing how the shadow feminine can behave in these ways of competition and giving false compliments, but is actually used to undercut the other person. So here she deliberately tells Pam, like, oh no, those glasses are great. They make you look so cool. And now Pam, not knowing any better, is thinking, oh, well, maybe I will. And for Kelly, that is, all right, now I'm one step above Pam. I will be seen as more cute and more attractive. Okay. Again, was there any abuse? Can't really say there was. Right? She didn't slug Pam in the face, but she did something that was much more covert and indirect. But think about if you were in this position as Pam, and then later you found out that this was the intention behind why Kelly said that. How would that feel in comparison to a punch? Right? I'm not saying like, okay, a punch is any better and less bad, but there's there's a certain quality to the way the shadow feminine cuts into a person that leaves very deep scars. And I'll be showing you a DM response from a woman where she talks a lot more about this. Now on to the next clip from a movie that some of you may have seen.
Hey,
Why were you talking to Janice Ian?
I don't know. I mean, she's so weird. She just, came up to me and started talking to me about crap.
She's so pathetic. Let me tell you something about Janice Ian. We were best friends in middle school. I know, right? It's so embarrassing. I don't even... Whatever. So then in 8th grade, I started going out with my first boyfriend, Kyle, who was totally gorgeous, but then he moved to Indiana. And Janice was, like, weirdly jealous of him. Like, if I would blow her off to hang out with Kyle, she'd be like, why didn't you call me back? And I'd be like, why are you so obsessed with me? So then for my birthday party, which was an all-girls pool party, I was like, Janice, I can't invite you because I think you're a lesbian. I mean, I couldn't have a lesbian at my party. There could be girls there in their bathing suits. I mean, right? She was a lesbian. So then her mom called my mom and started yelling at her. It was so retarded. And then she dropped out of school because no one would talk to her. When she came back in the fall for high school, all of her hair was cut off and she was totally weird. And now I guess she's on crack.
Another beautiful demonstration, really well done by the actress, on how women can use character assassination as a form of the shadow feminine to compete, to drag down one another. That was a false rumor that was spread by Regina about Janice. And all of a sudden, their friendship fell apart. Janice's social image also fell apart. So again, right, covert, indirect, not a single hand was laid. Right? There was no, physical abuse or necessarily even verbal abuse. But again, here it is, just through a rumor, through gossip, somebody else's life is ruined. And no remorse from the character Regina. And now on to the next example.
I'm not ready to give up yet. Give up? I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. I mean, do you want to be an artist or an institutionalized cliche? You're asking me to quit my MFA, leave New York, my friends, my relationship. Oh, good God, you've known him for like 5 seconds. I'm just saying that do yourself a favor. Have some self-esteem and lose the creepy retail loser. Do we have to go there? Just be real, okay? You want to be real?
Now, this clip is also one that really hit me when I first saw it. So it was my wife who suggested, hey, would you like to watch this Netflix series called You? It's about this guy who is a serial killer, psychopath. And I was like, you know what? Sure, fine. Let's watch some of these shows that you like, because otherwise I would never have any interest to watch these things. But this character, Peach, I think is her name, or Peaches, the one who is telling Beck, I believe is her name, was telling Beck, like, drop the retail loser. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. Do you want to be an institutionalized cliche? She played the shadow feminine phenomenally. Like, whenever you have a strong emotional reaction to an actor or actress, where you're like, damn, I hate this person, and they're just playing a role, that they've done a phenomenal job in tapping into something. And so Peach, she did a wonderful job. And throughout the first or second season, however long she's was in this show, she demonstrates this artful manipulation, gaslighting, and also obsession towards Beck and then the other people in her life. It's you kind of get the sense that they're all pawns, and she's like this queen who is arranging the pawns where she needs them to be so that she feels in control. And again, I'm just being real. Have you ever heard from a woman in your life, or it could have been from a man expressing the shadow feminine? Hey, I'm just doing this for your own good. I'm looking out for you. But even as they say it, there's something sticky, there's something slimy, just not right to it. They're saying seemingly the right things. Again, they haven't laid a single hand on you, but there is this tremendous sense of, it just doesn't sit right. Right? That is the shadow feminine in action. Now I want to go into one of the DMs I received from a woman who was replying to my Shadow Feminine series when I first posted it on Instagram. And I mentioned this earlier, so now we're looping back to it. So she said, I lived it, so I know for sure, all of it, damaged by women and by men. Women is far worse. The thing is, those aspects of what make women wonderful also make us vulnerable in the world, to men and to each other. And since safety is paramount, women use those very things, our capacity for empathy, our beauty, our intuitive nature, etc., to harm others and protect ourselves. The damage it does to people is worse than men, or the damage it does to people is worse than men can do, because with men, everything is upfront. They have the benefit of their physical strength and logical minds. Directness is why it's less painful. And what I was speaking to a guy punching somebody in the face, right? You've all probably seen the meme or the joke how men can fight each other and then afterwards they're like best friends. That's the directness. Women, she continues, lack those, and so their swords are far more subtle. It can be used over long periods to inflict maximum damage over time. Even if the size of the cuts is only hair thin, you can die from 1 million or 1 billion of them. Beautifully said. And the gaslighting is part of the strategy, another tool born of self-preservation. It's all evil. Part of the reason women need men is to protect women from other women. To me, women are the dangerous ones and men are safe. I get for some of you that sounds way controversial. But let me continue. Some men are dangerous, sure. Some have even harmed me. But on the whole, the damage women can inflict on other women is unmatched. This will be controversial, and I don't care because it's true. But I think the psychological damage via manipulation, criticism, and general cruelty and withholding of love is worse than physical or sexual assaults by men. Now, that is a very controversial statement because there are plenty of women and men who would probably hear that and say, no, that I cannot agree with that at all. And you don't have to, right? Because this is about her experience. Her experience does not need to be your experience. Your experience does not need to be her experience. But I was very moved when I first read this because it was one of the first times I was hearing a woman honestly speak to her experiences of harm from other women at the hands of other women. And she hasn't been the only one who has messaged me about how painful relationships with women for her have been. So this isn't about comparison or which one is better or which one is worse. They're different. They cause harm in different ways. There is no shortage right now in society of people talking about the harm men do. And that's why, some people might watch this and be like, all right, why don't you talk about the shadow masculine? Why don't you talk about harm from men? And to me, I'm not interested in talking about that because there's no shortage of people talking about it. That's how it's been for like several years already. Men, get your shit together. Stop being toxic. Masculinity is toxic. You guys are pigs. We don't need you. Do better. Do better. Men aren't lonely enough. We don't need you. Right? There's been plenty of shade and a demand for accountability and to do better for men across Western society. It's the loudest voice right now. There's no shortage of that. So to me, I really have nothing new to add to that. Yes, I agree. There are men out there who can do better, who can heal their wounds, integrate the shadows so that they can show up in a world where they're not a danger to women and other men and to children, that they can be in genuine service to others, which is what the highest calling for men in the masculine is to be of service. But besides that, right, there's nothing else I have to add to that conversation. There are already plenty of loud voices talking about it. But the shadow feminine, there are not so many voices talking about it. Because again, there's that split. Men are the bad ones. Men occupy the bad object. Women occupy the good object. Right? These object relations. So to me, I find the shadow feminine much more interesting and one that hasn't been talked a lot about. And here we're seeing more of the conversation is actually rich. It's rich with women sharing these experiences that have been taboo, right? Part of that sisterhood wound and part of that sisterhood vow of, no, you can't talk about this. Here's a woman talking about it, and that's why it moved me so much. Here's a DM from another woman, and she said, by the way, I love this series you're doing about the feminine shadow. You're not just helping the women following you to spot their own patterns, but you're training men to pay attention to them, to spot them when they happen, and to call them out. I don't know why men rarely do this. So I'm going to pause here. Two things I want to say to this. One, this is very valuable for men to learn as well, because for the most part, I think a lot of men out there are completely oblivious to the shadow feminine within themselves and also within women. And so when it happens, they have no idea how to meet it or spot it. The second thing, when she said, I don't know why men rarely do this. I think one of the reasons, besides being oblivious to it, is some men have tried and they got eviscerated and dragged through the gravel by either one woman, which could have been an ex-wife, ex-girlfriend, or dragged by the female mob, either online or in person. And it was to such a degree that these men felt completely eviscerated, emasculated, and they're like, I can't do that again. And again, not a single hand was laid on them, right? Just think about that, the gravity of how a person can be so psychologically, emotionally eviscerated, not have a single hand laid on them in a physical or sexually abusive way. And yet that chops them down even more than those physical acts could have. That's huge. Continuing. I've always heard the I'm staying out of this drama line, which some men do say, okay, I want to stay out of this drama. I don't want to get involved. But the truth is, every time a man interferes in the drama, things get cleared out. He doesn't even need to do more than observing and naming the things which happened. That's all it takes for the manipulation, bullying, and gossiping to end. But it seems that few are aware of this. I see the shadow of the feminine as the work in the unconscious. It's never named, it's never acknowledged. Everything happens in complete awareness of the effects. Everything happens in complete lack of awareness of the effects. We have this image of ourselves, and listen to this part, because especially for the women, we have this image of ourselves as kind, compassionate, gentle, etc. Then the shadows take over and we pretend it didn't happen. When another woman tries to call it out, we brush it off. But when a man does it and clearly names the full effect of the behavior, it's like you suddenly pull the shadows in the light of the consciousness. I've seen this so many times. The moment the masculine acknowledges the harm done, the feminine shadow breaks, usually in tears and an explanation of the fears and pressure she felt that led to her behavior. I wish more men would understand this power they have, to step into it and simply acknowledge what's happening. I'm going to take a sip of water while you think about that. I'm going to circle back later in this presentation to that piece around where she said, women, we have this image of ourselves as kind, compassionate, and gentle, and then the shadows take over. And we pretend it didn't happen. That's very accurate. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll speak a little bit more about what she says here, which is key, that I wish more men would understand the power that they have to bring in this masculine discernment and the light of awareness. That is one of the greatest gifts we can offer. And if you haven't heard it today, you will, for the men. Some more DMs. Or actually, this was a comment on a post, the Shadow Feminine post I made. It was about gossip, and one woman said, women can feel when other women are gossiping about them. I had this realization when I was gossiping about a woman, and then she posted on an IG that same day her pain about exactly what we'd been saying. I also this happened multiple times. I also recently had a dream about being stabbed in the back and woke with sharp shoulder pain and knew exactly who had been talking about me. We are all energy. We don't need to hear the gossip. We feel the energy being directed at us, and it's not harmless. And that was That was pretty powerful. Like her experience of she doesn't even need to hear the gossip. She can feel it even when she's not part of the conversation. And I would say it's true. We are all energy. This is where, you can have a dream about somebody and then, they'll message you out of the blue and be like, hey, I just had a dream about you, or I just thought of you today. Right? How does that happen? Energy. Quantum physics can talk about all of that. So same here. Right? The energy being directed through gossip is not just harmless. And then another woman responded, just a simple DM, ha, women are vicious. Simple, straightforward. And then a DM from another woman responding to my stories about the shadow feminine. She wrote, I think the reason there'll never be a Me Too movement for men is also because the backlash from women would make any toxic responses men have had to their Me Too look like forehead kisses. Emotionally eviscerated is the perfect description of the shadow feminine. I'm a woman who is terrified of disagreeing with women in groups. That is huge. I'm a woman who is terrified of disagreeing with women in groups. And this is where, like, to all the women out there, to all the men out there who feel emasculated and are stuck in their own feminine, they haven't been connected to their own masculine core. So this is for women and men, caught in the conformity groupthink paradigm. Whenever you as a mass group of people, individually and then collectively, fear disagreeing with other people in a group, you give, consciously or unconsciously, a permission slip that says, yes, I accept this. This is okay. It's a tacit agreement and approval, even if that's not what you're intending, of, yeah, this is okay. I don't have any disagreement here. Obviously, there are sometimes some situations, right? This is now thinking of The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is actually a great book talking about soft power, hard power, and you could say forms of masculine and forms of masculine and feminine ways of doing combat and warfare. So sometimes I get it. There's like a utility to, I don't want to disagree. I don't want to be that hammer that sticks out and gets hammered down. So I get that. There's certain situations in your life where, if you're about to be hung, then yes, perhaps you would not want to just disagree in the group. Like it wouldn't be necessary to become a martyr and make a huge stand in that moment. However, 99% of the time, you are not in that position where you're about to be hung by a mob. Okay. 99% of the time, you're just in a group of people where people have formed this group consensus and nobody challenges it. And because nobody challenges it or questions it, it doesn't even have to be rude, just respectfully questioning it. Because nobody does that, it's a tacit agreement and approval of this is the shared reality we all agree to. We don't even necessarily like it, but you know what? Because we're so afraid to speak up, we're just going to all agree to it. And then just like a group of sheep walking down a hill and falling to their death, that's what happens. And that's why you need a sheepdog to be like, hey, here's the direction to go. Not over there, over here. And that's one of the gifts the masculine has to offer. That more individualistic of, yeah, I'm not afraid to be outside of the group, even at the cost of being shunned or shamed. Because this other thing, truth, authenticity, honesty, is more important and valuable to me than just belonging. So, I appreciate the honesty in which she spoke about this, of how she's terrified of disagreeing with women in groups. And if she's saying this, that you can bet that there's many more women, probably 90% plus of women who can agree with, yeah, I'm also terrified of disagreeing with other women in groups. And what happens when a mass group of women does that? Right? You perpetuate this shared reality that underneath the surface, you guys actually don't really like. And what happens when that happens long term. Those resentments, those thoughts are like, yeah, actually, I don't agree with this, that get buried, repressed, or suppressed, then have no way to express themselves, but then to leak out unconsciously, which I'll get into a little bit later of the consequences of that. She continues, right? A perfect example of this is the very popular Reddit subs, Ask Men and Ask Women. Guess which one is generally open and thoughtful about differing opinions, and which one is an absolute morass of pile-ons to tear limb from limb anyone who questions the superiority and victimhood of its gender. Ooh, powerfully framed. I've never backed out of and unfollowed a sub so fast. I admire your bravery speaking about this, and I'd love to think that we could mature as a species and each own our own shadows. And I responded, thank you for sharing your experience and insight. That Reddit dynamic does not surprise me. Men's red pill spaces have turned into that as well, but not to the same degree. So the red pill spaces and how men behave on those podcasts, that's an example of the shadow feminine in men. When comparing how men try to insult and harm with words versus how women do it, the men really do feel like toddlers calling each other butt heads. That's just how I see it. Again, men can slug each other in the face, wrestle, then become friends later, call each other butt heads. That's the extent to which it goes. When women do that indirect aggression and warfare, it makes men look completely basic. And now I want to share with you this story, the Brianna Madia story. This one was wild to follow when I heard about it from somebody else I follow on Instagram. Now, my focus on this story is mainly to illustrate the characteristics of the shadow feminine that came into public view. I'm not here to go into the nitty-gritty of the whole trajectory of the story. So I'll just give you this snapshot. Brianna Madia is, I guess you could call her an influencer, a lifestyle influencer, an author, has a pretty large following on Instagram. I think it was in 2018, her dog was ran over and in life-threatening condition. A friend of hers started a GoFundMe to raise money to help save her dog. And they did end up raising money to get the treatment needed to save her dog. And then I think it was in 2020, Brianna came out publicly with an Instagram post, and she said she had been losing sleep. She did not feel good with receiving all this support and monetary support from the GoFundMe that her friend had started, because she hadn't shared one of the details of the story. And the detail was that her dog was ran over accidentally by her ex-husband. And so she came out publicly and said, I'm willing to offer you a refund if you donated to the GoFundMe and you feel like, what, you're mad, you're upset. Happy to offer you a refund. Reach out to me with, the details, and I'll refund your money back. And then what happened next was she experienced bullying like nothing else. And she has a YouTube video. You can search here titled, I found the identities of 200 plus cyber bullies. Now here's a screenshot of the Instagram story of the woman that I followed, who follows Brianna, who shared. And she said, you guys following this Brianna Madia story? She was destroyed online for years by the social justice warrior types over seemingly nothing, as per usual. Then a forensic media analyst reached out to her and offered to find the identities of 213 people, and she agreed. Now she knows who each of them are. All women, nurses, therapists, disability support people. I just want to pause here for a moment. All women, 213. That is not an insignificant amount. nurses, therapists, disability support people you would call helpful, caring, empathetic. Right? This circles back to the DM from the first woman who said, those qualities that make us women as beautiful, caring, empathic can also be our very downfall in the shadows. And absolutely, right? Because you would think nurses, therapists, disability support people, right? Loving, caring, empathetic, and they probably are. But then there's this other shadow to them because, well, they haven't really integrated that shadow. Oftentimes, these people can overgive, right? That's something that happens for the people pleaser or the fawning response. If you're stuck in people pleasing, fawning, such as myself, I had been in that for a while, you start to resent other people and you resent yourself. And those negative feelings of resentment, bitterness, even hate towards other people is intolerable to the psyche that can't see, more of the gray, right? It's that black and white split. And so it splits off the bad and wants to externalize it somewhere else. And that's why I think for a lot of the social justice warrior types, many of them who are activists and fighting for something, they're fighting based on their own sense of powerlessness that they project onto an external object, a group of people, race of people, identity of people, and said, you guys are powerless. I'm here to save you, to help you. We need to include you. We need to fight for you. But really, it's also just a projection of their own internalized powerlessness that they never face, that they disown, repress, project onto somebody else. And so that level of care that they have is actually based on this savior martyr complex that they fail to address within themselves. Because if they did, that would destroy their ego. That would lead to an ego death. So it's better to put it outside. That's one of the functions of projection, is the psyche attempting to make conscious what has been unconscious. And so let's continue. The issue with the current social justice narrative is that it completely dehumanizes people. Anyone with any amount of privilege and people with hardly any who happen to disagree. It's heartbreaking to see what she's been through, but it's nice to see how the story ends. And I'll get to how the story ends. But yeah, this dehumanizing of people based on one's own internalized sense of powerlessness, but inability to see oneself in that way. Seeing oneself as, no, we're gentle, compassionate, and we're kind. We fight for what's right. We're for justice, right? That's what we're about. We're about empowerment. And then treating people like this. 213 people, probably more, on a hate bullying campaign from so-called kind, empathic people. There's this false illusion of inclusion that women stuck in the shadow feminine do. It's like, no, we're about inclusion. We want everybody to include it. Nobody should be excluded. We're about equality and equity and all of this. And yet their behaviors betray them. Their behaviors betray this ideal that they hold because it sounds good. That's another shadow of the feminine. We'll say things that sound good, but in action, it's very different. And so the inclusion is an illusion. It's the sounding good surface level inclusion, but underneath there's actually exclusion. No, you're not allowed here. You're not allowed here because my reality doesn't match with yours, and I demand that your reality be like mine so I can feel included and not excluded. Then, we're going to tear down anybody else who stands outside of that, who doesn't match it. So the inclusion is just an illusion. It's false. It needs to be everybody is miserable. Nobody gets to be awesome. We all either are on the same level of misery or nobody else gets to be successful. We have to all be successful. And there you have the herd mentality, groupthink, conformity mindset. Now, here are some screenshots that Brianna had collected from the Reddit thread that was created about her. And because of the help from that forensic analyst, she found the names of these people who thought they were anonymous. And you can find this, like, this is all on her Instagram. I'll show you where you can find it later. But here she says, Rocco loves Coco is a woman named Natalie Berkman, a rancher from Montana who can't wait for me to die. And so let's just read through some of what she wrote. I have a feeling her demise might come a lot sooner than we might think. Somebody else, it really feels like it's just going to be any day now. I can't wait. I'll be ready with popcorn and ice cream for everyone. And then Brianna also wrote, Razviva is a moderator named Mila, whose last name isn't on here because she basically made a plea deal to save her own ass. So I think after Brianna started to show these receipts of like, no, I do have all your guys' information. It's not just all anonymous like you guys think it is. Some of these women reach out with a plea deal to cover themselves. And then the Rocco loves Coco lady responds, I'm going to bring a shitty crudite, however you pronounce it, platter from Walmart because that's the quality she deserves. And you just see the feeding frenzy. It's like a joyous, like, oh, I can't wait to watch the downfall of this woman. If that's what you get off of, like, okay. And then Razviva replied, there will be a costume contest. Please come dressed as your favorite cringy Benina moment. Bonus points for dogs who also come in costume. First prize, is it something, whiskey bottle full of sand. Bring a dish that pairs well with Schadenfreude. Another screenshot. Anna Tupaka lives in Yukon, Canada, and is a wannabe influencer. Of course, she's so enraptured with herself. She watches her own content. No surprise there. She doesn't think anyone is better than her. She probably points her camera at her bunghole so she can watch herself shit. She's that absolutely full of herself. Talk about a projection. Talk about a heavy projection right here. And again, you get the sense of the feeding frenzy. Like, I just imagine a woman's eyes like glowing with like this excitement of, yeah, let me feed off of this hate and resentment and bitterness about somebody else that I can hate externally because I've disowned my own hate towards myself and sense of powerlessness that I refuse to address, that I want to keep out of consciousness. So I'm going to put it onto somebody else. It's a feeding frenzy out there. Another screenshot. And here we have Tori. Tori works with autistic children. I have no shame saying that I wish Bree only bad things in her life. I genuinely do not want her to find happiness. I want her to be a miserable, lonely bitch forever. She deserves it. Again, let's talk about projection. Projection in your own unresolved internal psychological conflicts that get projected onto somebody else. It's like women love to watch somebody else's tale outside to either capture her own demise or her own success, to live vicariously through other people. That is not empowerment at all. So here's where you can find all the things that I just shared with you. It's public on her Instagram page. And it's on the highlight that says F around, find out. Yeah. Let's move on to this next slide here because there's something truly powerful about Brianna's story. And this is just my own perception, interpretation. My take is that Brianna voluntarily took accountability in a way few women at her level of visibility ever do. I can't think of too many women publicly with that level of a huge following and also success ever take accountability for something that was out of integrity in their own lives. Like, that's what Brianna did. I'm sure there was immense guilt and regret about, that whole GoFundMe thing. But what I admire is the fact that she took accountability of her own volition. Right? She didn't start that GoFundMe page. People could say, all right, well, she was complicit in that she agreed to, use the funds. All right. But she took accountability. And that is huge. And to me, that voluntary taking accountability is a symbolic representation of the shadow feminine being brought to light. And the collective shadow feminine, this is the collective, right? Because Brianna is just one person. While she may have been the symbolic representation of the shadow feminine being brought to light, the collective shadow feminine did not like this and responded with calculated malice. And this is the great irony of this, is that the loudest voices among women are always calling for accountability. We need accountability, especially towards men. The patriarch, you need accountability. And yet when somebody does take accountability voluntarily, as opposed to being exposed in some sort of a scandal, it's not good enough for these women. Whether it's a man or it's a woman who takes accountability, it's still not good enough. They want more pain. They want more suffering. They want to feed off of it more. And this is where I think for a lot of women who are unconscious of the shadow feminine within themselves, and also for men who are unconscious of the shadow feminine and have been deeply feminized and disconnected from their masculine core, they're idealistically virtuous, but behaviorally hypocritical. And you've likely heard the saying that the path towards hell being paved with good intentions. It's easy to be idealistic and virtuous by just saying stuff like, oh yeah, we should be about this, equality, equity, and blah, 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 everybody included, nobody excluded. But it's not based in reality. It's just this idealistic virtue that has no foundation underneath it. It's not grounded. It's not embodied. And so that's why it shows up behaviorally as hypocritical. And these anonymous women on that subreddit were living out their own self-destruction by projecting it onto an external woman. They want anonymity while they demand that other people be publicly shamed. Right? The hypocrisy, how backward that is. And as I said earlier, they were in a feeding frenzy. The shadow feminine gets into a feeding frenzy. That's what gets her off. And unlike the shadow masculine, right, that destroys with that brute, swift, violent force, the shadow feminine likes to take her time. She likes to play with her food, cause long-term suffering. And here's the scary part about all of this. The shadow feminine in most women is completely unconscious of this. Most women are not conscious of this at all. So to them, it doesn't even occur as they're doing anything bad. That's the scary part. And I'll go into more detail what I mean. Here's a quote again from the book Woman's Inhumanity to Women by Phyllis Chesler, where she says, she cites this study. In 2000, British psychologists Katie Tapper and Michael Bolton administered a questionnaire to 443 7 to 11-year-olds in the United Kingdom. They found that girls view aggression more negatively than boys do, and thus tend to deny to themselves and others that they have been aggressive. So they think, I am not really mean. I'm not that mean. I'm not actually mean. Citing an earlier 1996 study by other British psychologists, Tapper and Bolton note that girls do not admit to themselves that they have carried out an act of indirect aggression, and therefore do not respond with feelings such as guilt and regret. As a result, the likelihood of them repeating such an act in the future is not reduced. And this is huge, because that conception of, I'm not actually mean, I can't actually be mean, that inability, unconsciousness to be able to admit that they have carried out an act of indirect aggression means that it's completely outside of conscious awareness. They can't possibly conceive of. Many women or men who are stuck in that shadow feminine, deeply feminized, cannot conceive of themselves as doing anything wrong, as having done something that harmed somebody. And that's scary, because then anything that they do is just conceived of as, I did what was right. There's nothing wrong about that. And that inability to be conscious of that, to admit to oneself, that level of unconsciousness is what's present in the collective shadow feminine. This image that I used an AI art generator to create is how it feels. Like, I think this is a beautiful depiction of how the collective shadow feminine looks. And tying this into the quote by Carl Jung, where he says, "Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event." If you think about all the people, all the women, also all the men who are unconscious of the shadow feminine, reject it, disown it, can't conceive of themselves as having been indirectly aggressive, having done anything wrong, even being mean, when that is repressed, then it will appear, be projected, and manifest out in the world so you can become conscious of it, because the world is a mirror. So all the shit going down, all the exposure that we're seeing and will continue to see more and more. That's my sense, is moving forward, we're going to see more of the shadow feminine exposed in various different ways. They will appear in the world as an event because humanity, human consciousness, the consciousness of the earth is needing this. Like, we can't stay in unconsciousness. And it is through more chaos, more turbulence that this pressure is being applied for humanity to awaken. And here's one more screenshot of a woman who's justifying her behavior. "It is clear to me I am not the only one who has some issues to work out in my head over this. This thread is a place for that," the subreddit. "It's healthy. It's normal to talk this out. It's normal to dehumanize snark in order to deal with feelings. It's not the most mature way to manage it, but it's normal and very, very human." I wonder if she would say the same thing if she had a subreddit devoted to dehumanizing and snarking her. Probably would be a very different tone. But this is a great example, once again, of that study. That many women, and even as young as like the 7 to 11-year-old girls, cannot conceive of themselves as having been mean or done an act of indirect aggression. They can't conceive of it. At least for men in the shadow masculine, in comparison, most men who are acting from that shadow feminine know that they are doing harm, know that they're doing wrong, but they just continue to do it anyways. But at least it's consistent in the sense that they're like, yeah, no, I'm not pretending to myself I'm some nice, virtuous person. No, I just do evil crap, right? That's the shadow masculine. It can be conscious and honest about that with itself. But for the shadow feminine, it's like, no, I am so artful in my psychological manipulation that I can even manipulate myself into thinking I'm not doing anything wrong. That is the shadow feminine. It's the dance of illusion and chaos in a way that confuses everyone, herself included. So no bruises, burns, or physical harm. And that's the shadow feminine. It's all psychological and emotional. And unless you have such receipts like Brianna Madia, you'd hardly believe women in the feminine could do such things. And here's something I'm curious about is, will there ever be such a thing as a Me Too movement? But instead of women saying Me Too in regards to harm from men, it's going to be women saying Me Too about how they've been harmed by other women. Who knows? Who knows if that'll ever happen? But it seems clear to me that sugar, spice, and everything nice is not what women are, or it's at least not the only expression of women. There's far more to it. And when we think it's just sugar, spice, and everything nice, we completely deny this other aspect of the shadow. Now, onto the T app. So this app was designed first by a man, and the whole intention was to create an app where women could more safely date men, because his whole story was apparently his mother had experienced being catfished by a whole bunch of men through the dating app. So he's like, all right, I'm going to take it upon myself to create an app where my mom does not have to experience that and other women do not have to experience that. And so, yeah, the whole idea was safety tools to help protect women. Now, this is on their website. And, sure, the term tea and how, women love to spill the tea or, give me the tea. So I can understand sometimes it's just about, playful jest, having some fun. But even just from the design, especially this photo of the woman whispering into the other woman's ear and her going, it doesn't create a sense that this is about dating safety at all. It's almost a subliminal invitation of feed off the tea, right? It's again that feeding frenzy that the shadow feminine gets off of. What are those little things that I can hear about and then spread around and enjoy having something to talk about? So, as some people had said, conceptually, the T app was a great idea because, yes, there are men out there who date around with different women, do sort of the same sort of tactics of like, I'm going to charm them. I will, take them on a date, show them lots of affection, and then drop them, ghost them. They just want to get to sex. They want to use women to objectify women to satisfy their own sexual desires, but they have no actual care for those women or are interested in a relationship. And so those men go through, various women on the dating apps, or it could be genuinely harmful men who physically, verbally, emotionally abuse women. So conceptually, the T app was a wonderful idea. And it's something that women have done even just on their own, whether that was through Facebook groups or just their own little community of, hey, can we exchange information? Have we dated the same guy? And did he do the same things to you? And, should I be concerned or is this actually, no, like it's a good guy? So conceptually, great idea, but in terms of execution, it did not have that same impact. So use T to find verified green flag men, run background checks, identify potential catfish, verify he's not a sex offender, check for criminal history. Right? Again, in theory, sounds great. Here's what happened in practice. So there's a great account on Instagram called The 10 Men, and he did a whole post on the T app. And so he writes, T is a woman-only app with 1 million users and a waiting list of 13,000 more that is blowing up across America. So this post was July 25th of 2025. At that time, there was 1 million users. Those on it can anonymously upload photos of unsuspecting men, search by their name, phone number, and photos to find their target, and then indulge in a bitter spite fest of condemnation where men and even boys are strung up in a digital kangaroo court to be duly assigned red or green flags, having their alleged past histories, real or not, dredged up and splattered across its pages with no concern for its accuracy. It's become a black hole of due process from which no man can seemingly escape, and although originally well-intentioned, D has rapidly descended. Here is some snapshots of comments, posts that he got from the app itself. Here's one where a woman says, the T app is literally a mix of tea, allegations, and bitter bitches. You got to just read it and weep. I don't know, LOL. And women posting comments on there such as like, what is his at? Ew, ugly AF, small, dick, broke, T. And yeah, it's just a place. It became a place to bully, defame, ridicule, dox, lie, and gossip. And other things he discovered on the app, some rampant homophobia, where one user comments, yeah, he's gay for sure. Trick with a small dick, the body shaming. What's the T on shrimp dick? some ableism. I'll go first, not enough dick or money to put up with him. LMAO, it's giving learning disability. So remember what I mentioned earlier about women, shadow feminine, the unconscious feminine being idealistically virtuous but behaviorally hypocritical? Here it frickin' is. For all the virtue signaling that the Western woman, especially it seems to be the liberal Western woman, progressive, we're all about equality, equity. For all the virtue signaling that they give about do not body shame, health at every size, no discrimination, blah, 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 you see the true colors here in this app. And I guarantee if you were to speak to those women outside of this feeding frenzy, the place where they dance in the shadows, they would tell you, no, I'm a good person. I believe in equality. I believe in, no discrimination. I believe in this, that, or the other. Belief, 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 zero integrity or embodiment. It's idealistically virtuous, behaviorally hypocritical. Here's a woman, and I appreciate this about George, who runs the Tin Men account. He says, there are also many women who are calling this out, calling out the shadow behaviors, the shadow feminine behaviors of the women in this app. So to those women, blessings and respect to you for doing so. And here's a woman who posted, this T app should be banned. I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Y'all really on here trying to rate these men and bully them. But God forbid if they made an app and done the same to us women. Not to mention, I'm not speaking on nothing I can't say with my chest. Y'all hiding anonymously. Scary. And interestingly enough, there was an app like this that was made about women for men to use, and it was deleted instantly. But this one, the T app, which was for women, took a little bit longer, a little bit more backlash before it was deleted off the App Store. One man laments that it's a place where hurt women can tell a one-sided story about men and damage their name without any context or proof. Another worries about a future destroyed by surveillance by our peers. In other examples, women post pictures of their partners while they are sleeping to find out if other women recognize him. Users are even able to set alerts for a particular man's name. And the source for this he quoted was from The Times. So this whole idea that women can be anonymous on this app and yet shamelessly put men against their own consent, information, name, address, phone number, all these things, right? You see the backwardsness of all of this. More on the T app. Some users were even posting names and photos of minors, which blows my mind. Again, a woman calling this out, she wrote, honestly, this T app is an embarrassment and basically a burned book like in Mean Girls. Because y'all know if someone made one about women in Uma, I have no idea what that is, y'all would be going off and trying to get people for bullying and harassment. Exactly, well said. And here's some screenshots taken from in the app. One person comments, now why they got my child on that T app? And he's 17, by the way, not 18. And then, I need to know who posted my minor child on a T app and who all these people are commenting on it. Number one, again, he is a minor. And it's a little difficult read here. So nobody was going to tell me they had put son on the T app, then go on their lion. Shit so messy and sad. Again, feeding frenzy, right? This is no longer about safety for these women on this app. It became about a feeding frenzy. And this woman asks a fair question. So, my opinion on this T app, do young people really need another platform to bully people and ruin lives? And a question, you grown-ass women on there, are you okay? Do you need a hug? One more question. Where is the app spilling the tea on these girls? Because I guarantee y'all wouldn't like that app one bit. P.S. I have boys and girls, so I am speaking as a mom of both. And then George presents the question, would this be okay the other way around? Which they found, no, it was not. As I mentioned earlier, that app was removed immediately. And here are some screenshots of YouTube Shorts from the YouTube channel of the T app. On one side, we have, it says, watch me confront my cheating man who just drove 4 hours for a date night. And then on the other side, a YouTube short with the text, today I found out the man I've spent 7 years of my life with, the father of my child, has been cheating on me with a coworker. He promised to marry her on day 2, and me, I've been waiting for a ring for 7 years. Now, if we were to take these at face value and let's assume that they were true, then of course, right? Heart-wrenching, heartbreaking for these women who found out that their man was cheating on them. And yet, based on the behavior on the T app and the way the website was designed with the image and how they were promoting it, I think these reels, these YouTube shorts, and the text, they are there for sensationalism. There's something about the shadow feminine that, as I've repeated many times, loves to get off on a feeding frenzy, loves sensationalism, loves the tea. She can't help but get off of it. And these titles, these texts on these YouTube shorts serve to feed that feeding frenzy, right? Get more into all your insecurities. I think this was an app design that profited off of the insecurities of women. Yes, women have had real experiences of being cheated on by men, abused, lied to, all these other things that are awful, right? That's just period, very clear. Those experiences happen, and they have happened quite often. But to create such an app that leads to this feeding frenzy to profit off of insecurity, I think is a complete disservice and just feeds that shadow feminine even more. So to me, what the T app revealed is that it showcased the shadow feminine beautifully. Women have used it for competition, defamation, and revenge, while also demanding that they get to be anonymous. And the irony is the guy who created this app, I think they said he hosted the app and like all the backup data onto a public Google Drive server or something. So what ended up happening was that got hacked, and a lot of women who thought they were anonymous had their info leaked. So this T app basically leaked the private data of men and women. Won't say any more about that. As I mentioned earlier, it profited off of women's shadow feminine expression and their insecurities. Thoughts that the feminine gets consumed with. Could he be cheating on me? If it happened to her, could it happen to me? Does he truly love me? All these things that are just feeding this feedback loop of insecurity, and insecurity attempting to control and look for security through digging. And that also keeps women from being present in a relationship and more connected to her own intuition. Because if you're so focused on insecurity, you can't be connected to your intuition. And the other thing this T app revealed is that it magnifies the women and men in society who operate on lower states of consciousness and awareness. Back to this piece about sensationalism and how women, the feminine, just loves to blow up a story. It loves to adorn it, loves to decorate it, make it more than it was, like the whole saying of making a mound out of a molehill. And I thought, you know what? I want to bring this into perspective. Give me the numbers. Let me see if I can figure something out. So I decided, first, let's figure out how many women are on the T app. And prior to it being removed from the App Store, there was over 4 million women on the T app. I was like, okay, all right. Now, how many adult women are in the world? Search that, and it came up to be about over 4 billion adult women in the world. So I said, okay, of the total population of adult women in the world, what percentage of them are on the T app? So doing a little bit of math, right? 4.5 million, just an estimate, divided by 4.5 billion times 100. And the answer is 0.1% of the total population of adult women use the T app. 0.1%. It's not a huge percentage. So what does that indicate? Okay. There's a specific type of person who thinks a specific type of way, carries specific insecurities, and has a self-concept about themselves. There's a specific profile, right? It's the way that their subconscious mind operates. It's the frequency or vibration they vibrate at. There's a specific type that would use such an app. Because if you were to survey the population of women who are secure within themselves, who don't need to feed off of tea or a feeding frenzy, they're like, I'm just not interested in that stuff. You're not going to find them on this app. Like, they already see the app itself as a red flag. Like, no, I'm not going on there. So there's a specific type of woman who would use such an app. And that specific type of woman is also going to date and attract a specific type of men. She's not going to be attracted to the type of men who are grounded, who are self-aware, who are stable in their nervous system, because that's not attractive. That's seen as boring. She, in her shadow feminine, wants the drama, wants the chaos, wants this feeling of aliveness, but also chaos. These are the type of women that would use such an app and get off on it. So to me, I don't see this as something like, oh, we need to blow this out in proportion of, like, look how awful men are, or look how awful women are. Nope, there's a specific percentage, and a small percentage of the total population that also happen to be the loudest. So I want to bring some perspective and reframe here. And what's important about this is that you don't attract what you want. You attract what is a match to your current state of consciousness. All the women who can't help but complain about how awful men are, like, that is all that they are focused on, those women aren't doing too well within themselves. They are not at a level of consciousness where they are truly connected to empowerment, their own creativity, their own integrity, and their authentic self, their true self. They are stuck in the slave self, the false self, the not self, right? The persona, the subconscious programs and prisons that have been running within their mind, in their psyche. That's where they are. And so when they are there, they can't help but attract what is a match to that. Because again, it's not about attracting what you want. It's about attracting what you are a match to. And lo and behold, you're going to be a match to the men who behave like douchebags if you yourself are operating at the same frequency and wavelength. So there's a huge gap between saying I want something and the thoughts, the behaviors, the beliefs, and the actions that you do. You're essentially rehearsing what you attract in your life outside of conscious awareness. So this is why it's so important for women and men, but I'm saying especially women with this presentation, to be conscious of the shadow feminine, because as long as you're unconscious of it, it's going to direct your life. And like Carl Jung says, you will call it fate. As long as you remain unconscious, then it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Next example is the Disney movie Tangled. Lovely movie. And what I want to highlight here is the character, Mother Gothel, because she is a very important archetype here. So Mother Gothel is, she originates from the Brothers Grimm fairy tale, Rapunzel, and she is depicted as an evil witch who imprisons Rapunzel in a tower in order to exploit her magical hair to maintain her youth. She lies to Rapunzel about her origins and locks her in the tower for her own good. And the art style and the animation, lovely. It just captures that shadow feminine so well. And there's a scene from the Tangled movie that I want to show you that captures the essence of Mother Gothel beautifully. Specifically, this archetype of the devouring, controlling mother.
Not still talking about the stars.
Floating lights, and yes, I'm leading up to that.
Because
but-
I really thought we dropped the issue, sweetheart.
No, Mother, I'm just saying, you think I'm not strong enough to handle myself out there.
Oh, darling, I know you're not strong enough to handle yourself out there.
But if you just...
Rapunzel, we're done talking about this.
Trust me,
Rapunzel.
I know what
Rapunzel.
I'm... Oh, come on!
Enough of the lights, Rapunzel! You are not leaving this tower! Ever! Oh, great. Now I'm the bad guy.
All right. So when I first watched this movie, I saw that clip and I was like, ooh, that. I know exactly what that feels like because I experienced that in relation to my own mom. And I bet many of you watching, both men and women, can relate to this to some degree. And again, she didn't lay a single hand on Rapunzel. No verbal abuse in terms of destroying her character, calling her names. And yet, that goes deep. That goes deep within the psyche. And, for a good portion of the movie, you see how Rapunzel is essentially brainwashed into mother knows best. Mother just does this to protect you. Mother cares about you. And, in the beginning of this clip, it's very subtle, right? Again, it's this indirect aggression. It's covert. It seems calm, and yet there's you can feel the edge of the knife there. In the beginning when she says, Rapunzel, because I really thought we were done talking about this topic, right? There's this sense of, hey, we're done with this, and are you seriously going to try to talk more about this? There's a subtle, again, edge of a knife feeling there of don't push me, right? Don't disturb mother. Don't you dare disturb mother. It's that subtle. And also cutting down her own confidence, right? Oh, I know you couldn't survive. I know you couldn't handle yourself. Cutting down Rapunzel's confidence, her desire to go out into the world. And then later, the burst of aggression and yelling. You aren't leaving this tower, ever. And then the cherry on top of the weaponized guilt trip of, oh, now I'm the bad guy. I've had that happen to me with my own mom. And it creates a deeply painful sensation of, gosh, I caused my own mother suffering and pain just through my own desire and interests. Wow, so it must mean my own desire, my own interests are bad. And because I don't want to be a bad boy, then I'd better please mother. And now when this plays out in relation to the devouring mother, to the sisterhood wound, the sister shadow, it's like there's no room for your own individual person. You have to be part of the group. You need to keep group harmony, even if that harmony is suffocating you and everybody else. Right? You are all colluding. You are all agreeing on a subconscious level. Yes, we'll continue to perpetuate this. Meanwhile, we're harboring all this resentment and repressed aggression, and then it gets leaked out unconsciously. This is huge. Okay? At least with the shadow masculine, it's upfront in your face. It's a little bit easier to deal with. But when it's subtle, covert like this, it is like pulling teeth to try to bring consciousness to this. Because again, back to that quote from Woman's Inhumanity to Woman, young girls can't even admit this to themselves. And that carries on into adulthood. If you can't face these things, they will find a way to dance and come out sideways, diagonally. And let's go a little bit more into the devouring mother archetype. Uh, Mary Louise von Franz, a prominent Jungian psychoanalyst, wrote about this, or she spoke about this, and she said, when interviewed, the devouring mother on the personal level would be the fact that many women who are over caring for their children try to keep them back from life. It begins by being anxious. Don't do that, it's dangerous. Don't do that, it's dangerous. Don't go out to play with the boys. You could fall and wound, or you could get hit over the head. And by trying to keep the children too much in their clutches, and then we speak of devouring mothers, and such mothers also have trouble when their sons and daughters begin to date girls or boys. They say, I'm very much wishing that you marry. I'm very glad. But that girl you bring home now, no, that is not the right girl for you. Or that's not the right boy for you. So they keep the children in their clutches. I think back to that first DM, the woman sent him, many of the qualities that make women beautiful, great, right? Caring, empathic, can also be the ones that cause harm, because there's the shadow side of it. The shadow side of too much prioritization of harmony, that we must all agree and feel the same way. Harmony is beautiful. There's a degree in which, when I see how women care for men, women, children, how women can just care, their level of empathy, desire to include and bring everyone together, it's tremendously beautiful. It's such a gift. And yet there's also that shadow side of it. If a woman is not integrated in her own masculine, right, or animus, as Jung would speak to it, then she can't bring in the clarity. She can't bring in the differentiation, the individuation of, yes, I am me, I'm connected to the group, but I'm also not, fused and enmeshed in this group. If that is not integrated, then it leads to this shadow side of women coming together for the desire for inclusion, harmony, to where everything is an amorphous blob. Amorphous blob. Right? And if you fall out of that amorphous blob, then you've committed some sort of a crime. The other piece, right? The mother's desire to care, to give, to love. Beautiful. Right? Incomparable. Can't compare with that. And yet, when it's not integrated with the masculine, with the animus, there's no differentiation to say, okay, I've fulfilled a role up until this point as mother. Now it's my responsibility to actually let go so my children can go forth, grow, make mistakes, learn, test their own wings instead of me clipping their wings. When mothers can't do that, then you go into the shadow side. Control. Let me dictate your life. You will not leave this tower, Rapunzel, because I care for you. It's for your own good. Right? Mother knows best. Now, why does the devouring mother do this? And it's really just based in her own insecurities, unresolved psychological conflicts, past traumas, what have you. So the task for mothers, for women, for men who are become overly feminine, is to shine the light of awareness on these insecurities, these unresolved psychological conflicts. Because when you integrate them, that's when they no longer rule you. Now I want to get into this patriarchy rebuttal, because imagine many women will say something like, women only do these things because they had to. We didn't have a choice. It was our way to fight against toxic men the only way we could. The harm men do is incomparable. And there's validity to this. It is incomparable because it's different. And yes, if women couldn't fight back, right, against men who are genuinely doing harm to them, physically, emotionally, sexually, then they had to rely on more of these subtle ways. An example someone gave was like in the medieval times, like, all right, the women had to poison the wine or the food of the men. And like, I get it. If you were, captured and oppressed by this man who treated you awfully, and you wanted to escape. You couldn't do it with brute force, right? You had to find a different way. So I agree, there's validity to this. There's some validity to this. But the other issue here is that it's also an example of deflection, which is another mechanism of the shadow feminine. It's the convenience of having something more overt to compare oneself to in order to avoid accountability. Again, back to that quote, woman's inhumanity to woman. I'm not that bad. I'm not that mean. I'm not actually mean. Men are more mean. Can you see what men have done? The scars and the bruises and this, that, and the other? That's always the thing to point to. And not only is it pointed to as, oh, some men do. No, it's like all men are awful. Even as some women like, okay, it's not all men, but there's still this attitude of, no, all men. A great place to deflect, right? To avoid looking at oneself. And there's such an irony to this, which is that the shadow feminine can't get enough of herself, self-absorbed, self-centered, but yet when it truly is about seeing herself, no, she doesn't want it. Let me put up the smoke and mirrors and illusions. You don't see this. And here's where I have a question. Would it be all right if a new generation of men were to say, we experienced severe psychological and emotional harm at the hands of women. Now we will defend ourselves through the brute force of the shadow masculine? If your answer is no, that would not be all right, then okay, the flip inverse of that isn't all right either. Of, all right, we experienced severe physical and sexual harm at the hands of men. Now we will defend ourselves through the force of the shadow feminine. It becomes this endless loop, right? The carousel of misery. This shifting back and forth on this seesaw of, all right, we suffered, now it's our time, and then you will suffer, and then now it doesn't end if we keep playing this game, dancing this dance, orchestrated by forces in the world that would love to see men and women at each other's throats, because then it's much easier to control. At a certain point, shadow feminine, she becomes her own worst enemy. She's stuck in this shadow dance, in the drama triangle, such that she must create an oppressor, perpetrator, even if it is herself. And again, it's these smoke and mirrors to avoid being caught. Oftentimes, the shadow feminine becomes her own worst enemy. She's perpetuating this within herself now. And this rebuttal, it's because of the patriarchy that we have to do this. This rebuttal also suggests that if men weren't toxic, all women would be instantly freed from the shadow feminine's behaviors. And here's where I have some more questions. Is women's jealousy and envy of other women because of the patriarchy? Did biological men winning beauty pageants and women not being able to say what a woman is a result of the patriarchy? My answer is no. No. We did not get to that. Right? Women do not experience jealousy and envy of other women because of patriarchy. We did not get biological men winning beauty pageants, or women gaslighting themselves to not even be able to say what a woman is. We did not get there because of the patriarchy. We got there because of the shadow feminine. Again, shadow feminine operating under groupthink, shame, control, weaponized guilt tripping. Do not fall out of group harmony or else you will be excluded, because we are that inclusive and all about belonging and equity and equality. Right? You see the idealistic virtues contrasting with the behaviorally hypocritical. And the other question is, how do women treat one another when it's only women and the terrible, awful men and terrible, awful patriarchy is gone? Let's take a look. There's this reality TV show in the UK that aired in 2009 called Boys Alone and Girls Alone. And they took boys and girls and separated them into houses. The whole experiment it was a social experiment, was to see how do kids behave without adult supervision and rules. And it was fascinating what they found in the differences between the boys' house and the girls' house. So the boys' house, what began was chaos and anarchy. Right? They said it was Lord of the Flies style anarchy. No rules, no organization. The boys ignored chores. They fought and wrestled, ran out of food, right? No organization. Until eventually they self-organized into hierarchies. Leaders emerged, and if there were boys who challenged the leaders, like the leaders would essentially challenge them back, and then that established, okay, what's the pecking order? And after that, it was better when they self-organized into these hierarchies. In contrast, the girls' house began with order and collaboration. Right? They shared tasks, there was group harmony. But then they started to develop and show these shadow feminine characteristics. There was envy, gossip, cliques began to form, indirect aggression emerged to the degree that some girls were like, they wanted to leave. So here you have the girls all by themselves, no terrible men or patriarchy there, and yet you still see the emergence of these shadow feminine behaviors. That is the small microcosm to show if 100% of the population of men tomorrow had their shit together, women would still have their own shit to deal with. But it's much easier to project and say, and split it onto just one person, one object. Oh, it's men. And then there's the adult version, right? So those were boys and girls. Now adult men and women in the show The Island with Bear Grylls, which aired in 2015. And that became a whole meme. It was mainly a meme that I saw a lot of the red pill guys use, and I understand they used it to poke fun of the women. What I saw with the clips and the memes that they shared was the men were far more organized in terms of their hierarchies and just naturally wired to survive in the wild, hunting, right, all of that stuff. Whereas for the women, there was no organization. There was no organization, and then there was like cattiness, there was gossip, and just a lot of infighting. And supposedly the women had struggled so much to get any sort of food or water that the camera crew had to be like, hey, like, we're going to give you some because otherwise you guys are going to starve to death and be dehydrated. Again, no awful men or patriarchy telling the women what to do. It's like they were just in their own group, and the men were in their own group. Again, if 100% of men tomorrow had their shit together, women would still have to deal with theirs. And there was this post shared by another woman, female creator, on Instagram, where she said, "The astonishing thing is some truly believe a world with only women would be safe and wholesome, as if we are not capable of wrath, violence, and vindictiveness against one another in extreme measures." And a men's account, a man who I follow, reposted this story and said, "I'm grateful to her for saying this, seeing how it lands differently coming from a woman. Women hold zero moral superiority over men. They just fight different. Indirect aggression versus direct aggression. For a few years, I worked almost exclusively with doctors' offices, primarily staffed by women. The level of dysfunction, petty, backbiting rivalry was beyond comprehension. Let's stop pretending the world would be perfect without men. Women treat each other 100 times worse than men do." So now I want to bring in the shadow feminine in men because, well, let's provide a little bit of relief. Maybe for some women watching, it's like it's been uncomfortable enough to face this, or maybe you've enjoyed it. You're like, hey, thank you, for talking about this. But Now I want to hit on the shadow feminine in men because it also exists within men. Not to the same degree, and it's also a little bit different, but it's worth bringing attention to. The most prominent example I see of the shadow feminine in men has been in spiritual communities and religion. Here, the abuse, and it's also covert, it happens through groupthink, the pressure to conform, gaslighting, spiritualized shame, weaponized guilt trips. Again, the same characteristics of the shadow feminine, just used by men.
So for you that don't think I should have that plane, God told me to have that plane.
Brief little clip, but here's I don't know this guy's name, but a prominent mega pastor in the States. Ultra wealthy and huge congregation of Christians he's preaching to, and all about how God told me I need another plane, I need another jet, I need another jet because this jet will help me fly faster to spread the gospel, this, that, and the other. Right? God told me. So because God told me, you can't question God, right? Because you don't want to question God's authority that's being put through me. Again, it's an appeal from the shadow feminine. Not a single hand was laid, no physical abuse. It's just, God told me. So if you question me, then you're questioning God, really. And would you like that on your conscience? And it's wild to me that there are still hundreds of thousands in such congregations who are like, yeah, this guy's right. We need to fund his jet. Bewildering to me. And then there are the spiritually enlightened yoni invaders. Okay, and yoni is just another word for the vagina. And these guys, Narcis or Narcis Tarko and Gregorian Bivolato, these guys are two prominent men who, I know Gregorian Bivolato was arrested because he had sex with an underage girl, so rightfully arrested. And then this guy who went under the name Swami Vivekananda, his real name Narcis Tarko, who was a student of Gregorian Bivolato, is now on the run. And you can find the article to read more about this on the Guru Mag. But these guys, right? Earlier I was just talking about more organized religion, like Christianity, some of the established ones. But now in sort of some of this new age co-opting of some Hindu philosophy, traditions, and teachings of Tantra and yoga, this co-opting by these spiritually enlightened yoni invaders, they appeal to women using the same shadow feminine mechanisms. Yes, they still cause abuse from physical, sexual abuse, but they use the shadow feminine as the way in. So the shadow feminine is kind of like this Trojan horse that they use first. An example of how they do this, perverting religion and spirituality control. The guy, Narcis Tarko, he said he claims to be the brilliant exponent of a unique and modern trend of thinking in yoga, who has reached high states of spiritual realization. Swami warns those who dare to speak against him that they are under demonic influence and face infernal consequences for many lives to come. Not too much different from Christianity in ways. Again, if you dare question me, you're questioning God, and then, hellfire and suffering and all of that stuff. It's mind control. It's mind control through the fear of being outside of the group. You will be cast out and you will suffer for it. Shadow feminine. And in that article, some of the women have described how they experienced uh, being around this guy, Narcus. So Stephanie Hauser, not her real name, went to Thailand to work through issues related to having been, I have to say it this way, raped twice several years before. She believed Agama would be a safe and welcoming environment to work through her pain and trauma. Like so many of the other women, Swami told her she had a lot of sexual energy, but that it is blocked, and she would need a few normal men to satisfy it. She says he essentially told her I could come to him and make love with him, and he could help move those blockages for me. Yeah, right. Again, perverting spirituality. I'm this enlightened person and I will help out, and I could see your chakras blocked up and, I'll help you unblock them so then you can be enlightened. You want to be enlightened, don't you? You don't want to be asleep. So if you want to be enlightened, this is the way. And she said, I felt sick. I wanted to say how inappropriate that was, how I felt he was taking advantage of me and using this opportunity to manipulate my weaknesses and traumas into something that would bring him pleasure. I didn't feel he actually cared about helping me figure out what was best for me. But instead, thinking he knew what was best, which was to have me allow him to fix me with his lingam, which is another word for his phallus, his penis. Another former student told me she found the overall environment at Agama exploitative and that the Swami often asked me to have sex with him. He told her it would benefit me to experience his Tantra master energy and that I had this power that needed to be matched by someone experienced like him. So here you see it. You see kind of some of the differences in how men use the shadow feminine, use it as a Trojan horse by which the shadow masculine then makes his interest. Both these dudes were interested in sex. That's all it was. Under the guise facade of, I'm spiritually enlightened and, we have to work to unshame the sexual energy, which it's that contrast, right? In some of these more established dogmatic religions, like in Christianity, there's quite a lot of shame around sexuality. And then so people swing to the other end of the spectrum, pendulum. And no, it's about liberation. We need to de-shame this. And then you have those people taking advantage of that. Okay. Moving forward, this is a slight aside, but moving forward, I think in the coming years, it's going to be a lot about severing a connection to any sort of perceived guru. The guru is not going to be the one to lead you to yourself. The age of gurus is going to go away. You can learn from them, you can study from them, but they're not going to be the one who's going to access your power for you. It's going to be tapping into that within. And when we all reclaim this within ourselves, both men and women, and I would say especially women who have any tendency to project this onto some male guru, you're going to have to find it within yourself because that's where it's always been. You don't need some guy saying like, oh, let me use my lingam and give you a yoni massage to help you contact this. No, you can do it within yourself. Continuing with this article, Swami's spiritual teacher is the infamous Romanian yoga guru Gregorian Bivolato, founder of MISA, Movement for Spiritual Integration in Absolute. It is perhaps the largest tantric yoga school in the world. In 2003, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison for having sex with an underage girl. He has been accused of coercing or seducing hundreds of vulnerable women into producing hardcore porn videos, some of which were allegedly underage. An article in the Daily Mail claims that he promised tantric illumination in exchange for sex with virgin girls as young as 15. It reveals that former members claim he was carrying out an Indian myth that said, if you have sex with 1,000 virgins, you will achieve enlightenment. Yeah, we're done with this age of gurus trying to, sell you that they are the ones to help you access your divinity and enlightenment and spiritual awakening. Enough of that shadow feminine. Enough of that. Another way the shadow feminine shows up for men is in the politically correct, woke, nice guy. And this was where I was for a period of time. This guy panders and performs to prove he's an ally in the hopes that he can gain acceptance and maybe get to sleep with a woman who approves of his performance. This is pretty widespread right now, especially in the West. In the more liberal states, this is what I see. A lot of men being white knights of toxic masculinity. I'm so ashamed of men. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm ashamed of my own masculinity. We need a matriarchy now. Women are the ones who need to lead. And, don't you dare open a car door from a woman because she's capable. And don't you think you need to pay for the bill? No, do it 50-50, or in fact, let her pay for both of your meals because women are strong and independent. And if you're financially successful and earn more than her, you're actually putting her into an oppressive place because you're controlling her money. It's getting ridiculous. And for these men, that advocacy, that allyship is not informed by any genuine care for women's well-being. It's performed out of fear and shame. And now these men who are feminized and not connected to their masculine core, they are operating essentially as a woman in the feminine shadow, beholden to groupthink, conformity. Don't you dare be the nail that sticks out or you'll be hammered down. They are behaving in those same ways that many women have in this sisterhood wound, this sisterhood shadow. Now, many men are doing this, especially the politically correct woke, yay, I'm all about, on the side of women. And then these guys turn around and project their own internalized misandry, hate of men, hate of themselves onto other men. And so they get off on trying to destroy other men to satisfy that within themselves. Like, again, wild how this plays out, right? Because how women have done this to cut other women, to manipulate, to destroy other women. These men who are more feminized do this to other men. It's remarkable, the parallels. So now I want to talk about the solution. We've looked pretty much in depth at what the issue is, how it shows up, the mechanisms, the behaviors. Now, what are the solutions? Because this is ultimately what I'm interested in for men and women. We don't need more red pill podcasts talking about how awful women are. We don't need more women talking how awful men are. Those who want to continue to do that, you have every right. You have complete free will to do that. Just know you get to stay at that level of consciousness, and you're going to meet the man or you're going to meet the woman who matches that. And so that just continues to keep you on that carousel of misery. You perpetuate the very thing that you hate because, in a way, you love that you hate it and you hate that you love it. Can't get away from it. It's just like Batman and Joker locked together in this dance. They don't know how to survive without each other. These men and women, deep in hate of self and other, don't know how to survive without something to hate and the love that they hate. But for the men and women who are interested in taking personal responsibility, you're done with that carousel of misery. You want true empowerment and awakening to move out of this, matrix trap of keeping humanity, men and women, at low states of consciousness. If that's what you're interested in, this is the portion to pay attention to. How to move forward. For men, bring your gift of clarity and discernment instead of living in shame. You got to speak up. Because when you speak up, other men, other women get to see you speak up. That gives them the courage to start to speak up. Women, hold yourself and your sisters to a higher standard of integrity. Live in the light versus colluding in the shadows. And I want to emphasize this to the men who are watching. Your masculinity is a gift to the feminine and to women in this regard. Its service is to bring in clarity and discernment to cut through the illusions. I believe we have a sacred duty to women and the feminine. And what has happened for so many men is we've either, one, turned away out of fear and shame, and that becomes the pandering white knights and the nice guys, which is where I was. I was afraid of being hated by women, of not being liked and approved of by women. So I turned away from fear, out of fear. And it's like, all right, let me just play along, stay in line. Number two, we've deliberately ignored it as a form of punishment. And I see this more in the MGTOW men going in their own way, incel, red pill community, where these men essentially get off on seeing women kind of destroy themselves. They're like, yeah, we're going to eat our popcorn now, and we're going to watch women suffer because you said you don't need us men. So yeah, we're not going to come and save you. In fact, we're not even going to do anything out of any goodwill. We're just going to enjoy your suffering. That's what some men have done. And then a portion of men are just completely unaware. This was a DM I received from a woman in response to the stories I had about the shadow feminine, and I think she presents some great solutions. So she says, I would say it's an evolutionary trait. As you say here, for men, if it gets worse, it gets physical. For women, it's different. For sure, some will get into physical altercations, but I would bet that's a tiny minority. I think most women just don't have that impulse in themselves, unless there's a physical threat in front of them or their child. So if it gets worse, what do you do if you don't use your fists? You damage their reputation. You exclude, you cancel. Is it worse than men's violence? I don't know, but mostly I don't see the point in trying to create a hierarchy here, which is that I agree, it's different. It would be a waste of time, of our precious time. I agree that women are almost never asked to be held accountable for this, and this is a big, big problem. I think the solution lies in personal accountability for this. And this is, I already read that part. I think the solution lies in personal integrity, acquiring maturity and responsibility for our own lives, being able to set healthy boundaries with others, and most importantly, embodying these boundaries. Also holding our sisters accountable. Being intentional and acquiring the ability to walk this life with dignity, pride, and honor. When all of these concepts are deeply understood, not by the mind, but by the body, we become living incarnations of them. We become living standards of them. And this is really well said, because this is the difference between that idealistically virtuous, but behaviorally hypocritical, because it's not embodied. It's easy to say, yes, my ideals of this are great, but do I actually live them out? That's where the embodiment comes in. And this is what she's speaking to. We become living standards of them. And an echo of these concepts spill in the way we talk, in the tone of our voice, in the words we use, in the way we walk. When all of these concepts are deeply understood, did I read that part again? Yes, okay. And when we're around others, without ever pronouncing a single word, we ask that they hold their standards high in our presence. More than anything, it's an energetic request. It's asking, because with every passing second of my life, I demand this of myself. I also demand this of you, that in my presence, you hold yourself in integrity. So maybe this is where the answer lies, where answers lie, in ourselves. And I think that's really well said. We set that standard within ourselves. We go out into the world. Earlier, I was speaking about vibration and frequency, and the type of women who go on the T app versus the women who don't. You shift the frequency and vibration you operate at by the way you conduct yourself and the inner work that you do. And then how you show up in the world will impact the people around you, repelling those who aren't aligned and then bringing in the people who are. And this is how one by one, we can shift the collective. So it starts with each and every individual taking accountability and responsibility. For men, because I keep wanting to emphasize this for men, because I think there's some men out there who are thinking similar to the way a lot of bitter, angry feminists are. Like, I think some feminists today are completely done. They're like, nope, we don't care about men at all. Y'all can just leave the world. We don't need you. And then there are some women, some feminists who are like, do better. And when you all do better, then our world can actually be better, while not really requiring anything of themselves as women. Some men think that way, where they're like, you know what, women need to get their shit together. And when women get their shit together, then the world can be better. And this is where I say, no, it doesn't work in that direction either. What you get to do as a man is to show up sturdy in your masculine. And if you've been more so the pandering guy, the nice guy, like I mentioned where I was, it's your task to reclaim that within yourself, to also sever this psychological umbilical cord that is connected to women, which is really based off of this unresolved mother complex, which I have a video talking about that. You can find it in my channel. Just find mother complex or type, unresolved mother wound, something, and you'll find it. You need to stand firm and sturdy in your masculine core. Because again, that is a huge gift you have to offer to women. Back to this DM the woman sent me that I mentioned earlier, where she said, but when a man does it, which means calling out the behavior of the shadow feminine, bringing it into light. When a man does it and clearly names the full effect of the behavior, it's like you suddenly pull the shadows in the light of consciousness. I've seen this so many times. The moment the masculine acknowledges the harm done, the feminine shadow breaks, usually in tears and an explanation of the fears and pressure she felt that led to her behavior. I wish more men would understand this power they have to step in and simply acknowledge what's happening. She's not the only woman who said that. There's another woman who mentioned, why she wants a relationship, what she assesses for in a man. She wrote, one of the main reasons I'm interested in relationship is for what my partner can mirror and reveal to me. I think I said beforehand, if I sense a man has no ability to call out truth, to see what I can't see, to help me grow in that way, I am considerably less attracted to him. To be honest, for me, it's not even less attractive. It's borderline a deal breaker. A part of me wants to know, too, that I can't pull the wool over my man's eyes, even subconsciously. Maybe it goes back to that desire to feel his strength, clarity of consciousness. Beautifully said. Honest. Deeply honest. And I think this is true for most, if not all, women. And here's the reality. As I mentioned earlier, some men are just completely unaware. Others have turned away to, just want women to suffer. Like, yeah, we're just going to eat our popcorn. Other men have turned away out of fear and shame. Essentially, men, either out of complete lack of awareness and unconsciousness, or they've colluded in this themselves. They're like, I'm so terrified of the shadow feminine, so I will put the wool over my eyes so I don't see this. And if I just do the things to make women happy and like me, then this will all just hopefully blow over. That's a disservice to you, and that's a disservice to women. Let these two messages from these two women be of encouragement to you, men. Let this message right now that I'm speaking be of encouragement to you. Because it's your birthright to reclaim this masculine clarity within yourself, this discernment, to be able to cut through illusions. It's in service to you, and it's in service to women. It's in service to all of humanity and children. So claim it. Claim it. It's your calling. It's a gift. It's a deep gift. And the more men who do this, the more our world will benefit. The more relationships between men and women will benefit, because we'll no longer be operating under these illusions. There's a beautiful scene from the movie X-Men: The Last Stand, and it's based on the comics, where there's this love, romance between Wolverine and Jean Grey. And Jean Grey, being powerful psychic, but then later possessed by the power of the Dark Phoenix, which, is a great example of the Shadow Feminine. Here's a comic panel that I found on the internet where Jean Grey says to Wolverine, "Strike, while the human part of me is still in control. Finish me with your claws. I beg you. I don't want to hurt you." And then she blasts Wolverine away, and he thinks, for an instant, Jean was back. I couldn't. Right? He felt like I couldn't just finish her with my claws, like, because I love her. Dark Phoenix takes over. What a pity, Hank. I've overloaded your precious scrambler. And there you see the possession of Dark Phoenix, or you could say the Shadow Feminine. And this is a screenshot from the movie itself where Wolverine stabs Jean Grey. And if you watch this, or you will watch it, you will see the moment he stabs her, yes, there's pain, but then there's this peace that falls over her face. Jean Grey realizes she's no longer at the mercy of the Shadow Feminine, no longer at the mercy of the Dark Phoenix. And then this peace just comes over her face, and she just relaxes into Logan's arms. And when I saw that scene, I was like, this is a great metaphor for the gift the masculine has to offer the feminine. The healthy masculine is like Wolverine with his claws, his adamantine claws, with clarity, with discernment, with penetration, done from love. To say, yes, I will free you from the possession and illusion of the Shadow Feminine. I will call it out. Because I can call it out, the Shadow Feminine no longer is fooled. She can no longer fool herself. She can no longer fool the masculine. And it is my belief that the Shadow Feminine deeply wants to be discovered. She wants to be discovered in her mechanisms, covert mechanisms, kind of like Oz in The Wizard of Oz behind the curtains. I think the Shadow Feminine wants the masculine to pull the curtain aside to say, hey, I see you. I'm not going to pretend I don't. I'm going to call it out. So she can finally be free and liberated from just like pulling all the levers and controls and being like, ha ha ha, nobody can see my mechanisms. I think it is also in the Shadow Feminine's desire to be fully integrated. In order for that to happen, you need to bring the light of awareness and consciousness to see it. And that concludes this presentation, this teaching. It's been a hefty one. It took a long time just to compile all this together. And like I said, this will not be the first time I speak about this. I'll have future videos to come going into some of these, again, in some more detail, maybe some more focused attention on specific stories or some more specific examples of the Shadow Feminine. Now, if you've enjoyed this presentation and you would like to do some more, studying, research on your own, here's 2 resources that I highly recommend. There's probably plenty more, but I haven't read those yet, so I can't recommend them. But of the ones that I have, highly recommend this book, Woman's Inhumanity to Woman by Phyllis Chesler. Kudos to Phyllis Chesler for writing and publishing this book, despite the pushback she got from other feminists, even herself being a feminist. Like, that's courage, that's bravery, that's stepping out of the groupthink, and much respect for that. And then there's the Tin Men. The Tin Men on Instagram. He's got great account getting into a lot of the nuance of men's issues, women's issues, and highlighting some of the lies by omission that we've kind of just accepted from women from the shadow feminine. Like he's not afraid to get into that. And I think he's done a lot of his homework and a lot of his research. So both him, the Tin Men, Phyllis Chesler are great resources that I can recommend. That all being said, if you've watched all the way to the end, thank you so much for tuning in. And I would love to hear from you. Any comments or questions that you have about this presentation, this teaching, I would love to hear in the comments. And until then, I will see you in the next video.